So I wanted to mention again, thanks for attending Sunday Morning Zen, this beautiful July 4th morning. And we're going to get started with this morning's program, but before we did, I know that Reverend Gyokuzan had something to talk to you all about, so I'll turn it over to Gyokuzan.
Hey, it's the 4th of July. It's a grand old flag. It's a high flying flag. Oh, sorry. Sometimes I get carried away. See, today, the United States of America is 245 years old, but the Zen Life and Meditation Center is 10. That's 10, 10, 10. And we think that's something to celebrate. Let's face it, 2020 was a bust. It's time to have a party. So we're going to do just that. Mark your calendars. July 17 at 6 p.m. in the garden. Gonna be drinks, appetizers, munchies, good people, good friends, and some pretty amazing door prizes. So check us out. Get your ticket at zlmc.org. And I will see you there. And if you're lucky, I'll teach you the song. It's a grand old flag. It's a high flying flag.
Many thanks, Gyokuzan. Many thanks for that compelling ask, and I do hope to see everyone there. So this morning, we have a talk with Roshi Robert Althouse, Barbara Barnes, and Reverend Lori Shinko Snyder, and it's titled Compassionate Speech for Uncertain Times, Standing Your Ground Without Scorching the Earth. So I'll turn it over to you three.
We don't know how we're doing this morning, but we're going to do it and have a good time sharing with all of you. It's such a joy to see you all. And as you may know, Barbara Barnes, who is a professional, has a company called Brave Conversations, is facilitating this with me. She does, for her work, she does conflict resolution. And then Reverend Lori Shinko Snyder is also teaching this workshop that we will be doing together next weekend. We call this workshop the Inner Disarmament Workshop. It'll be Friday night and all day Saturday. So I think I'll just give some opening remarks and then I'll turn it over to Barb or Lori to say something. But it seems to me, one of the reasons it felt important to do this work, we've done this kind of workshop in the past, but we haven't done it for several years. And it feels important to kind of at this moment in time when as a country and as a world, we seem to be so divided. And I think people have some anxiety about how to have conversations with people that they might disagree with. And we just don't seem to have, we've all been in a pandemic for over 14 months and we're all kind of in our own silos based on social media, which sort of just basically confirm whatever we particularly believe. So speech is important in our practice, and it's one of the eightfold paths. It's called right speech. When we study the precepts, it's one of the precepts that we study, of the 10 great precepts that we study, and it's actually one of the 5 main precepts. It's called the precept of not lying. And when we put that in the proactive sense, it would be the precept of speaking the truth. So the question is, how do we speak the truth without torching the earth? How do we speak? And you know, it's even questionable now, no one's quite sure what the truth is anymore. It's truthiness. We live in a world of truthiness. So we live in uncertain, and Bodhidharma said of this precept, he said, you know, the way to keep the precept of speaking the truth is not to preach a single word. So I may already be breaking it. So NVC, or nonviolent communication, is something that all three of us have studied. I had the good fortune to study with Marshall Rosenberg, who created this in 2000, 2001. And the idea here is, can we speak from our experience in a way that with someone else and have a conversation where we may disagree about what we're talking about? Can we do that without making the other person wrong? That's essentially what I think we're moving towards when we talk about right speech. How can we speak our truth in a way that doesn't demonize the other person? And that is a skill and a practice that we do here at our own Zen Center. And that's essentially, we're teaching principles and practices of that skill called nonviolent communication in our workshop next weekend. So that's my introductory remarks. I see Barb on the screen here, so maybe Barb could say something, and then Lori, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth.
Sounds good. I think we sort of decided to have this be a panel-ish, and I have to say, Roshi tuning in from his vacation, that's really something. And I was in a class with him on Saturday, and I just have to warn you, if he suddenly has the binoculars up, it's a pileated woodpecker, which is more exciting than what's happening out in front of my monitor here, which is a squirrel that seems to have gotten into catnip or something. It's jumping from tree to tree. So if my eyes dart around, it really is squirrel. So as I was starting today, I had some just gratitude. Michael, I want to just thank you for being behind the scenes and making all this work. It creates so much ease, and I'm very, very grateful. So I agree. I think for me, nonviolent communication really launched an exploration of how I could engage in a world in a more skillful way, and in a way that would address my need to have peace between myself and another, and within myself. And one of the reasons that I was really attracted to go to one of Roshi's workshops called Inner Disarmament, it was in Salt Lake, was the word inner. You know, that's where this begins. And it is an inside job. And it takes time to learn that. It's an inside job of identifying, how do I even know I have needs or feelings? It's an inside job of embodiment, and it takes time. And it's a kind of a different language than we learn in this country, for sure. So if I have a big disagreement with someone, I have to look at what my part is inside of me. What am I disagreeing with? And a red flag for me is if I hear myself think, well, they're just stupid, or they're just wrong, or whatever, because that's a detour from what's happening in me. And I hope people will come to the class, because we're going to talk a lot about one of the aspects, which is of this kind of communication, which is kind of mourning. You know, it really relates for me to my practice of letting go of and looking at attachments and aversions. Because for me, for this to work, I have to do something that's really radical, and that is I need to let go of the outcome. Because if I approach you and I want to have a conversation and I have an outcome in mind, I'm going to be applying power, and I'm going to be misusing that power, and I'm going to misuse my speech, and I will become manipulative, or I will become sort of a victim. And so there's a really beautiful third option, but it's not always easy because we don't always end with a peaceful conversation. I can tell you that over the years, people have actually come to me and said, you know, a year or two later, whatever it is, I thought about that conversation again. And I just felt like you didn't tell me how I had to be. And it created a space. And that's, you know, so I create a space inside of myself, or I acknowledge and discover a space inside myself. And then I try to maintain a spaciousness of ideas and curiosity during these tough conversations. Part of it is mourning that maybe even before the conversation begins, that I may not get what I want. And if I end a conversation with my right speech and care intact, I've done something that I really want to do. So it's, you know, it's do no harm. It's the tenets. And I'm very grateful to have done it for so long. I do it internally. And I'm going to tell one funny story. Yesterday we were in class with Roshi, and don't worry, it's not about you this time, Roshi. That he talked about, you know, anger. We know a lot is anger is fear in many, many, many ways and many times. And I remembered when I was first learning nonviolent communication, I hollered at my daughter, you know, and then I told her later, you know, I was scared, and that's how I look when I'm scared. I might look angry when I'm scared. And so she came home one day, and she didn't give me very many opportunities to be angry. She was just a pretty docile kid, but she disappeared, and I didn't know where she was, and she was about 8. When she came back, I said, you have to tell me where you are and where you're going, because otherwise I won't be able to help you if something goes wrong. She just looked up at me and said, I like you better when you're scared. So, yeah, sometimes it's better to be where we really are instead of where we go with where we are. So, Lori?
I came into this practice after being married for 1 year. And I was probably pretty new to the Zen Center also. I married a very Brady Bunch situation. I married an architect with 2 young boys, and I have 1 young girl. And they're all in the same age range, about 8 to 10. Well, we were having communication problems with our parenting styles, with our just general everyday communication that everybody has. And I just wanted to have a better connection with my husband and with my family, because I found that there was a lot of yelling, and it disrupted me. It disrupted my need for peace. And I remembered that if you want world peace, it starts with inner peace, and it starts at home. And that's the hardest place to practice, but it's where the rubber hits the road. And before I came into NVC practice, I used to go around evaluating and diagnosing people because it was their problem that they couldn't communicate with me. I'm right, you're wrong. And it's, you know, I'm like, oh, you're a narcissistic egomaniac. That's why you can't say what you want to me, and this is never going to work out. See ya. Or, you know, oh, I see, they can't talk to me because they're bipolar and they're autistic or something, and we're never going to be able to see eye to eye. And that's diagnosing. And it only makes the situation worse. And it reinforces the right and wrong. And that's just division. I would rather communicate with people and understand what they're trying to say. And so I started to get into NVC for that. And my husband and I took the NVC class from Sensei Jun. And we were terrible at it, just terrible. We could barely read the book. We would barely show up to the class informed. But we were getting some of the concepts down. And we got some of the concepts down enough to where, to this day in my family, if someone says something, they say, was that NBC? Did you say something very NBC? Well, no, man, I might not have. Let's try that again. So it's still, a work in progress, but after the year after I took that NVC class, one of the other persons that I took the class with, Dan Dennison, he and I and Sensei, we all had this idea that we would create this support group. And it would be a support group in the NVC at the Zen Center. And we would meet monthly. And we did that. We met monthly, and we were all just kind of choppily learning along the way. And people would come and they would bring their communication issues, and we would help them through their communication issues. And then they disappear because they had a hard time. This is not easy language to learn. This is like learning a new way of talking and understanding people, because we haven't learned. All our lives, we have not learned a very skillful way of talking and listening to people. So we're relearning how to connect, how to hear, how to talk that's helpful. I used to let people run over me, if they yelled at me, I'd take it really personally. I'm still working on that part. But I used to just let them totally run over me. They'd yell at me, and then I'd be like, okay, and I'd hide under a rock. But this Zen practice and this NVC practice has helped me understand and helped me really stand my ground. And that's what this is about. And this is really about world peace. It really is. If we all could learn this and we could all apply it together, just imagine the world we'd live in. I have more to say, but I'm just gonna let share that platform here.
I was waiting to see if you had more to say.
Yeah. No, you first.
Here we go. We're figuring out how to do this. I learned about NVC when I first started teaching in the early 90s. My teacher, Nickly Roshi, who has been such a wonderful mentor for me, told me she had done a workshop with Marshall, and she told me about NVC, and she said, Joshin, you might want to learn this. It's a wonderful, skillful means, and you can, it would be something you can help, would help you work with your students. So I started studying NVC, and then I was delighted when I could actually study with Marshall when we moved to California in 2000. And one of the things I remember that Marshall said that really just threw me for a loop is he said, sentient beings are either saying please or thank you. That's all they're saying. They're either saying please or thank you. And I said, Marshall, what do you mean they're saying please or thank you? So then he said, their needs are being met. They're saying thank you. And if their needs are not being met, they're saying please. And a lot of people don't say please very skillfully. A lot of sentient beings might say please to you by saying, you're an idiot. That's the way sentient beings say please unskillfully. And so the more I worked with this please and thank you, I realized it's really just having the ears of a Buddha, essentially. When you can hear either please or thank you, it completely revolutionizes the way that you relate to people. If you can hear someone saying please when they're calling you an idiot, it changes the whole game completely. And admittedly, it's not easy to do. So I think one of the key points that we stress in this work is needs awareness. And we need to learn about that because I always ask people in this workshop to think about, what did you learn about needs growing up as a child? Think about what messages you got. And when people reflect on this, usually what they learned about needs was something negative. You shouldn't have them. Or if you have them, it's selfish. Or if you have them and express them, it's bad form, it's impolite. All kinds of negative things. And we have the negative term being needy. So I think in our culture, in order to do this work, you have to start by doing a kind of internal reflection about what have you learned about needs and how have you internalized that in an unconscious way that you're not really aware of. Because in order to do this work, you have to see that needs are just basic human things that we all need. We all have needs as human beings, and they're very basic. We have needs for food, for water, for clothing, for fellowship, for respect, we have needs to be heard. And these needs are the heart of this work. And I think in many ways, the hardest part of this work as a process, because we don't really respect having needs. We haven't learned to respect them. We don't respect them in ourselves. So that's one of the reasons why I started calling this work inner disarmament, is that from my own practice of it, I realized that I really have to disarm my own judgments, my own aggression, in order to get to know what I even need. And that just takes a lot of inner work. It sounds easy when you just say there's 4 language patterns you can learn, and it sounds like a walk in the park, but any one of us will tell you that have been practicing this much for many, many years. It's an ongoing practice. And so that's a little bit what I have to say. I really enjoying teaching this together with Barb and Lori. It just makes it so much richer to have both of you with me on this journey. So I'll hand it off to Barb now, and we'll just go around a few cycles and then maybe take some questions and have more of a conversation with anybody about this.
Sounds great. I have to say I'm having so much fun getting ready for this class together. The depth that I'm discovering that we can bring is it's astonishing. And really, there's so much depth. We're already talking about sort of like, how could we maybe take that section and make it a possible course of itself? And how do you do community of practice? And so I want to say that while this is it's a daunting undertaking to start this, and many of you in the Sangha have already begun, it's the best thing I've ever done. So I'm 63. I've belonged to 2 cults in search of how to, be more peaceful, etc. I have learned incredibly manipulative therapeutic languaging. And when I landed on Hakomi, which is a body-centered psychotherapy with a Buddhist approach, and when I landed on inner disarmament and NVC, I was home. It was a much easier path to find this sort of native tongue that lives in the heart. And for me, that's what a lot of inner disarmament is. It is inner work. There's no way to change patterns without doing some of that inner work. For me, almost all the needs when I'm looking at a need, come back to a need for connectedness and a need to stay connected. And when I teach this to, whether I'm teaching this to executives or diplomats or organizations, one of the first things I do when I coach is I say, have you told this person that the connection that you have with them is very important and that's what you're the most afraid of losing? And they hadn't even thought of that, right? Connecting is very important. And one of the things that I love about inner disarmament and NVC work, that one of the things, I guess, Roshi shared what he got from Marshall, what I got from him was this really weird proposition that has worked so well for me. It's sort of like Aikido. When someone is coming at me with all these words, you did that wrong, it was a stupid thing. Last week, somebody said, I'm not sure this is best practices, getting really skilled and they're sort of looking for the buttons to push. What I do is put on my superpower cape of curiosity and authenticity, and I get really curious about what's behind those words. And I love that because when I can be curious, my limbic system doesn't have to tell me, there's a threat with great big, submarines sort of whoop, 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 alarms going off, and I don't have to gear up and get hard. I just, and sometimes I think I must look kind of like a freak because I'm just like totally listening and looking for what's behind that, what's behind that. And then I do this other really weird thing. I stop. After the person is done talking, I just pause and sort of see what arises. And then I ask permission to ask a question. So one of the other parts of this is, and you'll learn it when you come, and you may have already learned it, but the art, it's an art. And I'm really struck the last 24 hours I'm on this sort of, this is an art bent, but making a request is an art. It's an art form. And one of the things that is really important is to, if I make a request of you, and if you say no, I'm going to really get mad at you, then I've actually made a demand. And that's another thing my daughter, unfortunately, got really good at identifying. Is this a request or a demand? And to which I would say, it's a must. Must go to school today. But people know. I mean, I know. Do you know when someone is saying, could you please do this? And if you don't, by the way, you're going to be a jerk in my head. So working with that is another part of it. And working with social issues is another part. I've got a neighbor down the street who's a humongous Trump fan and very conservative, and all the news this person gets is through Fox and Gab and some others that are now going on Breitbart. And so, I just one day said, I am really stumped how we are going to understand each other's needs and feelings about all this, because we have no source in common. We just don't. And you think my sources are all incorrect and corrupt, and I don't have an appreciation and I have a hard time trusting your sources. What should we do? And, it was a great conversation starter, because then the problem was in the middle of us. It wasn't, me or him or trying to convince. And we had like an hour and a half conversation about media and journalism and being fascinated with it. It was lovely. We didn't solve anything, but we can smile at each other genuinely on the street now. And I don't know how long that'll last, but I'm enjoying it for now. We'll see what happens. So come to the class and learn how to create some of that. Thanks.
Sometimes the wars are in your own house, especially if you have teenagers. I have several situations where I had to interrupt the teenagers battling. And I was so grateful for this practice to be able to see past it. I think before this practice, I would have seen the teenagers battling and I would have said, can you guys just shut up, please? And I would not have resolved anything. And within the last year, the boys were visiting us. They visit us every other weekend. And one of the boys is very proactive in cooking, and we're very grateful for that. And the other one has a lot of social responsibilities with band and orchestra and what have you. So one night, one of the boys is in the kitchen cooking, and we have this rule in our house that if you cook or if you help participate in the family meal, then you don't have to do the dishes. We don't have a dishwasher. We live in a small apartment. So everybody hates doing dishes. I like doing dishes. I'm like, it's no different to me. But all the kids hate doing dishes. So they try and do some kind of cooking, or they try and evade it altogether. I gotta go to the bathroom, or I gotta something. And so one day, the boy that's cooking walks out of the kitchen, sees the boy at the table and says, so Jack, I suppose you're not gonna help out and cook, and you're not gonna do the dishes either. Well, imagine how Jack felt. Jack instantly went into flames. That is his normal behavior, but he did not want to take responsibility for that and was instantly in flames. And I saw that Jack would have liked to have been asked, and that Gavin was making assumptions. So I said, hold on, wait a minute. Jack, would you like to be asked? And he said, yes, I would. I would really appreciate being asked. And I said, okay, Gavin, can you reframe what you said into a request or a question? And Gavin was totally taken off guard. And he said, he kind of needed some assistance with that. And I said, well, you can ask, would he like to help cook, or would he like to do the dishes? And since nobody likes to do the dishes, Jack said, well, I'll make the guacamole. And it was like, oh, this is so much better than telling people to shut up. And it was such a beautiful moment. And I was so grateful that I had this tool to like facilitate and mediate between the teenagers. And I'm sure they were grateful too, because they learned a skill. We can learn that we're not responsible for someone else's behavior, only our own. So I'm very grateful to this practice and to the support group that I'm involved with through CLMC and Facilitate. We upped our game this year, and we all decided together as a group. We have a very loyal, wonderful gathering, and some of you were here on the Zoom call today. And we upped our game, and now we meet every Friday or Saturday. It's kind of fluctuating with people's schedules, but we meet once a week. And from doing that, we've all seen exponential growth. And the support is just wonderful. You know, we're able to help people through things, and we're all learning at a better pace because it's reinforcing it. And we've just become this really lovely support for one another. And that is open to any member, I will say. That is open to any member of CLMC. And you can reach out to me to join or find out about the Zoom links.
So one of the wonderful things about needs is that when we really start trying to connect to each other on the level of our needs, a lot of the differences we have are not so important. I mean, they're there. But I'll give you a story about how I learned about this. When I was studying with Marshall, I was I was working with Bernie in the Zen Peacemaker Order. And when 9/11 happened, I was in France with Bernie doing a workshop. And I came home about a week later, and you probably all remember what it was like, 9/11. And I had a huge need for community at that point, just to be with people. I felt lonely, I felt scared. And we were in Santa Barbara at the time, and I remember going to somebody's home and sitting in the living room with about 25 people talking. And this was about, maybe it was several weeks after the event. We were just getting ready to go into Afghanistan and start bombing. And I had some opinions about that. And so did everyone else in the room. And everyone was pretty animated and emotional and talking about how we need to go in and kill Osama bin Laden and bomb people in Afghanistan. And I just actually didn't agree with that point of view. So I'm sitting in this room and I'm being very quiet. And I thought, maybe I should just leave and not rock the boat, because if I say something that's on my mind, there's going to be a big brouhaha and a argument. And then I thought, well, I'm studying this NVC with Marshall. Maybe I should try it out here. It's a good opportunity to learn something. So I spoke up. I said, well, don't any of you want to understand why Osama bin Laden did what he did? No, nobody wanted to understand why. So I said, well, I do. And I heard on the Associated Press that he had 3 needs. He wanted the American troops out of Saudi Arabia, which is sacred soil for Muslims. He wanted to end the embargo that we had at the time on Iraq. And he had another thing, I don't remember what it was, but people started yelling at me. And I said, look, just because I want to understand why he did what he did doesn't mean I condone what he did. And then I started getting in this argument with this, what I assume was a fairly conservative woman. And we started arguing. In the middle of the argument, I thought, I've done this all my life. I've done these kind of arguments with people, and I will walk out of here tonight pissed off and righteous, and I won't have connected to anyone here, and it will make no difference, and I'll just, nothing has changed. But I'm studying this NVC. Why don't I try it out here? So I had to really work to begin to, and this woman was talking about bombing Iraq and how we should go in there and how dare they, and I just thought in the middle of the conversation, I said, well, I'm guessing you're scared to be on a plane. I'm scared. And yeah, she said, of course I'm scared to be on a plane. I said, so we both have a need for safety. Yes, we do. And then it turned out, she said, I have a son who's an airline pilot, and I'm scared for my son. So at that point, I realized that we weren't arguing about our needs. We had the same needs. We both had a need for safety. We just had different strategies for meeting our needs. And what's so ironic to me and paradoxical about this work, it is so much from the heart. And it's this inner work of coming from some place that's authentic in you, but you end up having a much more rational discussion about strategies for meeting needs, instead of having to demonize the other person or, you can stay in a conversation without separating, even if you have a different point of view. So her strategy for meeting her need for safety was to go and bomb Iraq. My strategy for meeting my need for safety was some idea about going to international courts and trying them in the international court. We had different strategies, but we had the same needs. And I think this needs awareness is really the key to this work, because we can connect at the level of our own humanity, and we can connect at a level below our beliefs. And so we also say in this work that not the first tenet of not knowing, and all the three tenets are important, but especially the first of not knowing, because especially in a time like now when there's so much disruption and uncertainty, it's just unskillful to have a fixed point of view. It's just unskillful. And so if we have the kind of practice that we have here at the Zen Center of mindfulness, and we can really pay attention to our how things are coming up moment by moment, practicing not knowing opens the door to this kind of curiosity that Barb was talking about, or the kind of conversations that Lori's talking about being with her teenagers. And it just makes, it's such an improvement over the alternative, when we can actually stay connected to someone even when we disagree with them. So I'll end with the last thing. One of the other things I always heard Marshall say, he said, if you want to live longer, don't listen to what people think. and I always thought that was kind of funny, because we all have points of view, but I think the point is not to be too rigid in your point of view, so that you can allow the possibility that other people have different points of view than you. But I think in the end, the discussion might be more rational if we were basing it on needs awareness, and then we would just be arguing about strategies for meeting the needs that we share in common. Yeah.
So I did an interesting experiment a while back when the presidential elections were happening, and I just, and I think I may have said this when I talked about mindfulness and conflict resolution, so forgive me if I did, but I watched the debates, and this is kind of an adjunct practice for me with inner disarmament, because it's part of my training in conflict resolution. And when especially the Republican candidate would go on a kind of a bombast, I would just ask myself in my heart, what would have to have happened to me to behave like that and to say those things? It takes the heat out of and it also takes the seduction out of evaluating and diagnosing, because it brings me to a heart-to-heart level with someone. And I use that a lot. I use that with my neighbor, and it's helped me understand some of his needs. And another thing that can happen is, I may be getting an understanding of my needs, and I may be getting comfortable with that, but that doesn't mean that the person that I'm in communication with is comfortable with theirs. So there has to be even a more subtle level of how to approach this, because for some people, if I address a need, the message that they get is that they are less than and needy, and that I'm, doing something. So it's a really interesting way to start experimenting with the way that this is applied. And it's really individual. So again, it takes a certain amount of presence, definitely takes a sense of humor and a lot of do-overs. I mean, I can't tell you countless times with people where I've been off the mark, and I just laugh if it's appropriate and say, oh my God, well, I really missed that one. Would you mind if I try again? Because that was just lame, and that's not what I want to do. And it's helpful to be able to do that. And I can tell you, I don't feel like I've ever lost any of my agency, which is the word I prefer to power. I don't think I've ever lost any of my agency by being honest that I've made a mistake in the communication, or that I'm confused, or that I'm sad that we're not going to be able to complete the connection. But it's foreign. We haven't trained ourselves this way. Now, the people in this Zoom room and at the Zendo have, you have a leg up because you've got some practice under your belts. But it takes practice and it takes diligence And again, it's the best thing that I've done. And I want to talk a little bit about, I do it with myself. You know, if I'm stomping around the house and have gotten stuck because I'm attached to a sensation of bitterness or cynicism, etc., I have to stop and ask myself, you know, what am I feeling? What do I need right now? What do I really need right now? And sometimes it's morning, like right now we're in this extreme weather pattern in my state, in Montana. And I'm really, really mourning our environment and where it's headed and the critters. And so I've just set aside time now every day to do that so that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because I don't know about anybody else in the room, but the specter of having to do all of that work all at once, it's too much. So I have a need for ease in the rest of my day. I have a need to keep my, you know, to be accessible to myself. And so the way that I've arranged that for today and yesterday anyway is to set aside some time and then to move forward into what I can do and not get stuck in what I can't do. But that wouldn't happen without this sort of inner disarmament skill of just looking. So thanks. Lori?
Well, I'm noticing that it's 11:44 and or 10:44. I'm in another state right now, and I know the three of us can talk about this for a long time, and because we are going to be talking about this, and we have been. But at this moment, I'm curious to know if anybody out also in this call has some questions. Would the three of you be open to opening this up to questions? Or two of you? Yeah. So we can't see everybody, so just if everyone just wants to open up and just start speaking.
Lori, you can change your view to gallery and you'll be able to see everybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, it's Shishin here. If you can't see me, I don't have a question, but I have a couple of comments to support you. And I am not a student of NVC, as Roshi certainly knows. I should be, but I'm not. But I am a student of, as Bonnie used to say, my boss, Shakyamuni Buddha. And I was thinking about when we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and that really means one, and it really means we're all the same. We're all one. And listening to you, I kept thinking to myself, yeah, we're all one. And I try, like this morning, I was riding along and three guys, you know, you get riding along the bike path, it's not very wide, and three guys was a section where there's no separation of the pedestrian and the bike path. And three big guys, probably another 50 pounds each of them, bigger than I am, were sort of wandering across. And I said, bike. And the white guy says, bike, bike, bike. And I thought, yikes. But then I thought, well, you know, we're all human beings. We're all here together. And that was really helpful for me at the moment, because part of my mind wanted to say a-hole, but I didn't. The other thing I wanted to say about, I was playing on the word mourning. Barb talked about mourning a lot. And I was thinking in English, with the start of our day is morning. And they're homonyms. And it's an interesting thing that when we mourn, it's also a beginning. I hadn't thought about it that way until listening to you, Barb, but I thank you for that. It's the beginning of another way of thinking about, okay, what's the rest of this life? because everything else is done, including that moment. So what are we going to do here? And one other thing, somebody said redo, and Pat and I were at a workshop once with Sherry Maples, who sadly has passed away. And she said to somebody, asked a question, she said, you know, when things go bad, you know, on your computer where you could do redo? Well, you know, I just say to people, well, can we do a redo? And man, Pat and I have done that now for years with each other, and it's been so helpful. Hey, can we do a redo? Roshi, you and I should have done that years ago. Who would have known, right? So I want to thank you. I wish I could take this workshop next weekend. I cannot. I'm locked into another program. But I would ask you guys, please do it again.
Thank you, Shishin. I love that morning. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll do it again. I don't think this will kill us, so I'm sure we'll be able to pull it off.
We're
I'm
having
really
way too much fun.
Yeah, we are, aren't we? I'm super curious when the floor opens up with something that I know is a difficulty, and I assume maybe there are some people here who don't have any difficulty in their communications. But I'm always curious when people, when we ask this, and folks that are here with us don't comment or ask questions. So I'm just going to encourage you again to look for a little bit of bravery and see what you can add with a question that we might be able to answer, or a curiosity, or even are you kidding me? I don't think this is this does not work. We're all going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, whatever it is that's alive in you, which is another NVC saying. I'm really curious if you'd get brave and hit that unmute button and let us know what your curiosities are. Sandy?
Well, I will just say that I'm intimidated by the time frame when I have family responsibilities. And so I know that on the Saturday, for example, we have our granddaughter's mom's birthday. So I can't commit to that kind of time. And I'm also mindful that this kind of practice and this kind of instruction really does require be there and be present in the time allotted, and don't tune out and go mute and stop your video and go deal with something, because you lose the whole thread. So if you can experiment with different days and different times, then perhaps there can be a way to accommodate, because some of us are not retired and not, you know, we're working professionals who have commitments, and it is hard, or we're practicing family folk. Lori, I really appreciated your teenager story, because gosh, how helpful that would have been when mine are 40s, late 40s. But you know, gosh, that would have been helpful, and it would have worked. I know. So thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion about re-looking at the format, Sandy. I hope everybody noticed what a skillful way he asked for his need to attend and described his time issues. Nice. Thank you for speaking for others as well. Katja.
Hi, everybody. This is Tanya. So I have a question about that. One question that has always sort of bugged me about this whole concept. And since you all have lots of experience, I wanted to ask it. Does it ever happen, have you ever noticed, people who have actually joined this kind of practice in order to come up with better ways to manipulate others? And how do you deal with that? I mean, I expect that eventually they sort of get tired and move on and go to other things, but I think that this could be a very effective way to try to manipulate other people. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of NVC parrots over the years. people that parrot the language, and it's pretty obnoxious actually. And I have judgments about that. I don't know how you deal with. I think that, I don't know. You try to be sincere and genuine from your own heart about how you're communicating, and hope that people hear that. I think generally they do. We don't always do the language perfect. I mean, a lot of people worry when they do this work about making mistakes or not getting it right. I don't think that's so important, and I don't think it's important to speak perfect NVC. In fact, I think it's often manipulative when people do that. And you might even discover, if you do this workshop and you come home to your family and you start speaking this way, they're gonna think, what happened to you? And they probably won't trust you because they're not used to hearing you speak that way. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer about how to work with people that are trying to manipulate me, other than to try to just be sincere and grounded in my own embodied experience and respond in that particular situation.
Yeah, this language doesn't, their skill doesn't fix other people. It just allows you to bring an authenticity to your situation. And as somebody else, if you recognize that somebody else perhaps isn't being authentic and they're manipulating it, then you can get curious with that need that they're working from. But it won't be easy, that's for sure. And you may have to consider other alternatives. Barb might have a better answer here.
I don't know about better, but I do adore the question because it does happen. Tanya, you're right. And I think it comes from a lack of skill on the person who wants to manipulate. I can tell you that the years that I've been in this, the unconscious of the person that they're trying to manipulate picks up on it pretty quickly, and it doesn't work very well. It really does appear awkward and stilted and gatekeeping and all of those things. So, like with Lori, if I saw it happening, I'd start to get curious about, what are they afraid of? What kind of fear is operating that if they really surrender to the process, and what sort of strategy does this match in them, etc. So that's not to say that, it can be misused and misapplied. For sure it can. I think one of the biggest beginner mistakes is thinking that it's a push button thing. If I say to you, when you did X, I felt Y because my need for Z was not met. Would you please? And then you don't do it. And I'm like, well, you're wrong. So I understand. And I think it would be really fun to explore that a little bit, and strategies, and also to just be sad that some people will try to misuse this. I mean, that's where some of that mourning comes in, and authenticity. Thanks.
I think you also know this too by the way you feel when someone asks or talks to you. How does it feel within your body? And you also know if you're using NVC clumsily by the way you're feeling in your body. I know when I first started out, it was hard to get the technical aspects down. And I got this, the 4-step. I was like, okay, I'm going to ask my boss and I'm going to use this 4-step and I'm going to do this. And it took a lot of courage, and I did it, but I did it aggressively. And that was just communication. There was no compassion there. It was just, I was like, she said yes, but I don't even feel good about that. What's wrong there? So you learn a lot about, I've learned tremendously about myself throughout this.
There's no guarantees things are going to go well because you use NVC language. There's no guarantees. And I think of this a lot kind of like the grace process. I think when you put together a series of things in a process, like your embodiment and the quality of your attention, and then you're trying to connect it, I think if the language comes from your embodiment, then it sounds more genuine and authentic to you instead of sounding like some NVC formula. Then I think when you put together these, the embodiment and the quality of your attention and your intention to be open and learn, it makes it much more likely that compassion is going to emerge in the conversation. But there's no guarantees that's going to happen.
To me, it sounds like you're all three saying that this is a means to help you to be more brave, more courageous yourself with how you express yourself. And then whatever other people try to do with it, well, let them go with it. And, you know, you will see it eventually and you can let that go. And it's important that you yourself are brave, like Barb's company name. So it's a good one, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, I think it can give you more confidence that you could be in a conflict and stay connected to the person. And I just think we're scared. I think we're all a little anxious about having these conversations because there seems to be no middle ground. And it just, you know, it's just, I think there's a lot of anxiety around conflict. And NVC can give you a little leg up to give you some confidence that you can show up in a way that is dignified and authentic, and then it makes it more likely that you can stay connected to that person that you're afraid of or that you're having an argument with, and it might be a better outcome. But again, there's no guarantees here. But seems to me a really important upaya for us right now when we're so divided as a country, and there just seems to be no ability to have conversations anymore.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, I think more than ability, we've lost a capacity. And so for me, this inner disarmament restores a great deal of capacity. And I think that sparks spaciousness in others to see that maybe they could have some too. Yeah. At the very least, if we don't agree, it leaves the conversation with a certain quality of softness so that there's an opportunity even years later to open it up again. Thank you.
For this wonderful talk. We greatly appreciate it and timely. Look forward to the upcoming workshop.
Thank you for the content and the examples. That was very helpful.
Thank you, everyone. Such a joy to see you all this morning. Bye.
Bye all. Hope you get to see your woodpecker again today.
Going home soon.
Okay. Safe travels.
I think I'm going to see Oak Park soon. A woodpecker.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you. That was great.